Driver's license testers, what's the worst thing a kid has done without batting an eye while taking the driving test? My dad was friends with a guy who worked for the registry giving the road test. His best story was of a kid who took his test while it was raining. He started driving without the windshield wipers on. The guy figured he was nervous, so tried to give him a break, saying, "It's raining pretty hard." The kid was white-knuckled on the steering wheel and just said, "Yeah." Again trying to give the kid a break, he said, "Don't you think you should do something about that?" The kid said, "Yeah." Apparently he didn't know where the wiper controls were, so he rolled down the driver's side window and stuck his head out. At that point he stopped the test and failed him. When I parallel parked, I hit the pole behind me, and the tester said it's fine. This should be an automatic fail, but I think that's a bit too harsh. Then I hit the pole in front of me head on. Did not pass. Wasn't a kid. My 80-year-old great aunt. The tester kept telling her to speed up. After a few times she said she can't see the speedometer, so she doesn't know fast she is going. He made her pull over, and she did not receive a renewal. Thank God. Last year I was making a left turn at a light, and a car swerved into my lane and hit me. Turns out was someone taking their driver's test. I'm not exactly sure how driver's test car insurance works, but the instructor told me we had to wait for the police and take details of everything. I'm guessing the driver did not pass. The kids make minor mistakes. And yes, some do make scary mistakes. However, it's the adults that scare me most, especially the seniors who are up for re-exam. Probably the worst test I've ever been on was this man in his 90s. I instructed him to turn onto a street when it is safe to do so, and he turned, narrowly missing a pedestrian. Not only that, but he was driving on the wrong side of the road. He came head to head with another car who pulled over to let him go. He was laughing about it because he was under the impression that it was a one-way road. When I got back to the office with him, I cut the test short and got him back in the quickest and safest way possible. He was astounded when I told him it was not a one-way street. Me, did you see any one-way signs? Him, no, but I assumed you were going to take me on one. My dad did testing for a few years, and he once had a girl stop on railroad tracks. There was a train coming, slowly, but still it takes them a long time to stop, and it blasted the horn right into the car passenger side with the window open. This just made her freeze up even more. He had to reach his foot over to her side to hit the accelerator. My best friend's son just failed because he went the wrong way down a busy 4-lane road. Luckily, they made it safely into a parking lot and the testing administrator drove them back. Took a test with a girl who drove on the wrong side of the road and took a left turn into oncoming traffic all in the same drive. It was through my school, and she was banned from taking it through the school because of that. My grandfather used to be a tester. He had one girl forget which way to turn the steering wheel, and they ended up in a ditch. Answered his phone. One of my classmates in HS failed his driver's test 6 times. During one test, he hit a pedestrian. Opposite kind of story here. When I was taking driver's ed, I was in a car that had the brake on the passenger side for the instructor to use just in case. Going 35 down fairly busy street, my car all of a sudden comes to a complete stop. In horror I look over at my instructor, who is sound asleep with his foot on the brake. I just sat there dumbfounded. After a couple people honked real quick, he shook himself awake, mumbled a quick accelerate and sat up adjusting his glasses. So that was fun. I'm not a tester, but I asked my tester during my full license test what was the worst thing someone had done. Apparently there was an older gentleman who drove through 3 stop signs before the tester told him to pull over. The gentleman explained that he didn't want the license, but his family was pressuring him, so ran the signs on purpose to fail, made sure no cars were coming first. My best friend was coming to a 4-way stop sign in our small rural town. The tester said to go straight, so she did, without stopping at the sign. Just drove right through without batting an eye. He basically told her, "Well, you failed. If you want to just drive back." My driver's ed teacher said that one kid reclined his seat all the way back. put one foot on the gas and the other on the brake, and grabbed the top of the wheel with one hand and said let's go. I went forward instead of in reverse when the tester was standing in front of me on the curb. I failed. Okay, 3 stories. My ex drove a Gia Tracker, tiny car. She pulled right into the parallel parking area and fit in so unbelievably easy. The tester made her do it properly. A girl in my driver's ed failed her test when she went to the MV because she turned into oncoming traffic. Not only was there a grass median, there was some of those skinny red/white poles for about 10 feet followed by a guardrail. Each side of the median was 3 lanes. There really was no way to miss it. But she did. On a lighter note, I did the backing up 100 feet. When the tester told me when, I stopped and, before I put it into park, he asked me a few verbal questions. Then proceeded to give me directions to leave the area and back to the parking lot where the parallel parking test would be done. Never put the car in drive. Pressed the gas, and car went flying in reverse for about 20 feet. He apologized and said my fault for distracting you. As far as I'm concerned, that never happened. I was the kid. And full transparency, it was a learning drive. Not the test. We had to do 6 scheduled drives with our instructor. And had a partner. One would drive for 30 minutes. Then you would stop and switch so the other could drive back. The rule when you got in the car, just so it wasn't a constant game of should I turn, was that you always go straight until the instructor tells you to turn. So one Saturday, we had a very early drive scheduled. We met up at the school, and I was the first to drive. We got about 5 minutes in, turned onto a main road, and the instructor quickly fell asleep. My partner and I quietly, with a smirk, agreed that we would still follow the rules. We took the road for about an hour and 15 minutes, until it dead-ended, and you had to turn. I pulled over in a parking lot, and we woke up the instructor to ask him which way to turn. It took a good 30 seconds for him to realize what had happened and where we were. He yelled at us both to get in the back seat, and we witnessed some very unsafe ways to drive as we headed back towards the school. And I didn't bat an eye. While I was waiting for my turn to do my 450 test, I watched a guy in a semi back into a light pole, and instead of seeing what, he gently backed into, gassed it, and knocked it over. Needless to say, I didn't get to take my test for an hour or so while they cleaned it up. In my local area, a guy in his mid-20s failed the test for some reason. At this point in time, the results of the test were shared in the car. After being told he failed, he proceeded to get out of the car and grab an axe out of the trunk. I don't know any more details beyond that, but apparently it is why the results are shared inside the licensing building rather than in the car. This reminded me of a moment I had during my final test. The tester had an arm injury and was wearing a brace on his right arm. I took a left turn way too hard and caused him to accidentally hit his arm against the door. I was just like, oh fuck, I'm so sorry. Surprisingly, he passed me that day. Maybe he didn't want me to come back, LMAO. As someone who worked in a DMV for many years issuing driver's licenses, even though I wasn't a license examiner, I think I'm the closest thing to your target respondent so far. The craziest thing I ever witnessed with my own eyes was a dude who somehow managed to lose control at 15 miles per hour, jumped the curb, and smashed into the guardrail. Needless to say, he was not issued a license. The best story I ever heard from a coworker happened immediately after she came inside swearing a blue streak because, during a part of the test where the examiner stands on the curb in order to observe maneuvers, her customer drove up over the curb and straight into her knee. When I went to take mine, the tester waited till I was at an intersection and then yelled, "Turn left." She scared me, so I did and failed, lol. When I went back to try again, she was just ripping into this girl and her mom in the parking lot. I was like, at least I'll get a different tester cause she's clearly busy, lol. Not a tester, but I watched my, at the time, know-it-all son do the California roll through 3 consecutive stop signs as he was exiting the courthouse parking lot at the beginning of the test. The tester stopped the test and failed him on the spot before he even got out of the parking lot. My son's excuse: I thought the test hadn't started yet. While taking our 450 test, I was sitting in the sleeper area, and the guy actually taking the test ground gears when shifting. He immediately let go of the steering wheel, causing the proctor to have to grab the steering wheel and drive for the 5 or so seconds it took for him to recompose himself.